Good morning. Thanks for joining us. You're watching the DMZ America podcast for Saturday morning, July 26th. I have to check that. 2025, the year of our Lord Donald Trump. Coming to you from the left, I'm editorial cartoonist Ted Rall.
Coming from the right, I'm editorial cartoonist Scott Stantis. For those of you who wonder the behind the scenes stuff, nothing is more interesting than watching two old guys try to figure out a tech problem.
No, and we're going to have to talk about, I don't know what even happened. Like, you weren't there and then you were there, and I don't even know. You have to tell me what you did to be there. So,
I unplugged all my microphones and all the audio stuff, and now I'm just doing this through my computer. So if it sounds a little hollow, I apologize for that. A little echoey, a little.
It'll be as hollow as your voice, Scott, will sound as hollow as America's soul. All right, so they. And for the record, I'm not using any. I'm just using the computer mic too. So hopefully we'll sound about the same, which I think is more important because it's weirder to have one host sound really different than the other host. Like one's got better support. Anyway, let's get into it. So Scott, you and I have long disagreed about Israel and its policies. And generally, basically the way they do things. This week, there's a lot of developments in the Gaza conflict that's now by far become Israel's longest war. Israel's a small country that has short wars. This war has dragged on nearly 2 years. It will be this October 7th.
Wow, it's been 2 years already. Wow.
Over a year and a half. And, it just seems like there's no end in sight. Ceasefire negotiations are basically at a complete standstill and have effectively broken down. There's no end in sight there. There's widespread reports of major famine in Gaza. There's photos of skeletal babies all over the internet. Groups like Doctors Without Borders. Everyone's reporting, their own doctors are literally starving to death and passing out while attempting to treat patients and conduct surgery from famine themselves. There's even the BBC, Agence France-Presse, and other major media organizations have said that their reporters are starting to die of starvation in Gaza. There's been all these incidents at the food distribution networks have pretty much been taken over by a U.S.-Israeli joint private organization called the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, GHF. And it was predicted that it wasn't going to go well, and it hasn't. Every time there's a food distribution point, there are shootings. There's different narratives, but there's no question that dozens and sometimes hundreds of people at a time are killed every time they open up the gates. So it's not being well managed. Let's just say that.
Okay.
And then also most notably on the diplomatic front, France has joined the ranks of the nations that have diplomatically recognized Palestine as a state, and they're going to exchange ambassadors and so on. So we should just,
why not?
A lot to disagree on here, Scott.
Yeah.
This will be a test of our, we always try to see common ground, even though we disagree politically about a lot of things. And we usually succeed, I think, in doing that. And we usually have comity, and so hopefully comity will prevail here.
I think so. It has in our private conversations. I don't see any reason.
True. So if anybody's looking for us to, start calling each other names, I think that's extremely unlikely. You can tune away. But if you're here for a thoughtful conversation about a very difficult subject, by the way, if you are watching on YouTube or Rumble, really appreciate you. Thank you for joining us. Please follow, and share the show as much as you can. It really helps us out. Helps us justify doing this. And if you have a question or a comment that you would like us to react to, post it in the live chat if you're here live, and we will, if we like the question, or we really hate it enough, we will answer it. And so, that's super exciting, isn't it? Woo!
Wow, that's 20th century.
Yeah, Jordan, 20th century is awesome. So, all right, Scott, let's get into it. Let's start with France's Emmanuel Macron, basically, to set the stage a little bit here, had teased that he might recognize Palestine. It's not the first country in Europe to do so. Spain and Ireland already have. It's funny, Spain's an important country, but somehow it didn't really make a huge splash when they did. Ireland, it was kind of like, well, they have a history of, they don't really like colonializations and they've been oppressed. So you can see why they feel like they have a common ground. But France, in my opinion, we've already a little bit pre-argued about this. I think this is a big fucking deal. And here's why. France is a major diplomatic power. It is a permanent member of the UN Security Council.
Really?
Veto power. It has veto power at the UN, just like the US does. It also is it is a G7 country. And it is also, until maybe about 60, 70 years ago, French was the lingua franca of international diplomacy. If you were a diplomat from any country on earth, you had to be fluent in French, and you would meet your counterpart and speak in French. It's I think impossible to overstate like how the iconic like historical role of France in international diplomacy. So I mean, France is not just another country. I mean, it would also be equally powerful if, say, Germany were to do this. France was also, alongside Germany, one of the two countries that founded the European Union. And so, I mean, the point is, obviously they've had their ups and downs like every country, but I think that this is going to open the floodgates. Already about 153 of the world's 197 nations or so already recognize Palestine. But those are mostly in the developing world. This will, now France joins Russia, China, India, other major countries. And this means that they can call more credibly for intervention into Gaza, maybe sanctions against Israel. I mean, yeah. But anyway, let's talk about that.
Let me jump in on this, Ted, because I just want to. First of all, France is not important anymore in the sense that you describe it. It was an important diplomatic country back in the 1700s when we wore powdered wigs. Happily, we don't do that anymore. Did this? I don't know. I find it laughable, and I'll tell you why. And I'm going to sound like such an asshole, and I'm trying not to be. But this is a laughable turn of events because we're going to recognize. It's like saying I'm going to recognize Clovis. I mean, what am I recognizing? What am I recognizing? There's nothing to recognize. There are no defined borders. There's no defined government. What are you recognizing? To me, it's preposterous on the face of it because there's nothing to recognize. So I'm just laying down a very practical groundwork here.
Just quick interjection. I mean, it was a big deal when the United States recognized Israel in 1948.
It was a big deal because
and like their borders were, let's just say, fungible at that time. Also.
Oh gosh, yeah. Well, yeah, but there was. I mean, Israel, the map, 1947 map. Established Israel and Palestine, and it was preposterous. If you look at it, it looks like the markings of a giraffe. It was just like pockets here. There's a majority of Jews here, majority Palestinians here. And it just was this weird patchwork. But don't forget, Ted, when in 1947, think about what the world was like. I mean, Germany, France, Italy, even England, but certainly the Netherlands, Belgium, Poland, Russia. I mean, they had lost millions of people. I mean, and had the shit bombed out. The only country truly standing was the United States. And so we could dictate that type of thing. This just strikes me. Yeah, you're right about the fungibility of the border back then, but they did establish it within 48 hours. There was a war and Israel kicked ass.
It was very quick. The events I was reading a history of Israel by a Zionist, by the way, who it's like astonishing when you just realize how day by day how quickly events were moving at that time.
So the French movement, you called the other day very excited. You say this is the end of Israel.
Beginning of the end.
It's not. It can't be. What? That's absurd.
Well, it's the beginning of the end of them, as a country that has widespread international support. It's the beginning of the end of basically they're on their way. I had predicted this would happen a long time ago. I was early. That they're on their way to becoming an international pariah, much the way that South Africa was under apartheid. And I do think we're headed that way. And I think this is part of that. I think we're going to go look back at this moment and say, this is really a big deal.
You used a phrase and you kind of threw it off, and I'm not sure you realized how relevant it was and how salient is this may be the beginning of the end of Israel as a welfare state. They get how many billions of dollars of aid from the United States, not to mention support from the United Nations and so on. Let me be clear. Let's jump now to current events and to what's happening today.
Sure.
You and I disagreed. I thought that the response to October 7th was not just a response to that one heinous attack where they murdered and raped, thousands of people, especially young people. At most 1,200, right? That's the accepted number. Not that look, one's too many, right? Okay. Well, yeah, but it was a lot. It was brutal. It was just a heinous attack. But this wasn't just a response to that, Ted. It was also of this continual attacks from Gaza, of launching missiles from Gaza into Israel. Now, if they were doing that, if they were lobbing missiles into New York, or they were lobbing missiles into Hoover, Alabama, where I live, I would have a growing disdain for the people who were doing it. Now couple that with October 7th, and you have.
But this is not. Scott, this has to be. Obviously, this is not. You can't be so context free here, right? It's like so. Hamas, first of all, was installed in large part by the Israeli government, by the Netanyahu government. The Netanyahu government literally delivered millions and millions of euros in cash to Hamas higher ups. They installed them. They wanted them as a divide and conquer strategy against Fatah in the West Bank. That's been the Israeli strategy in Palestine all along. And the point is that Israel's been blockading and oppressing Gaza for a long time. And, so the situation, the joblessness, the poverty, the misery in Gaza predates October 7th. So here you have basically people who are completely enclosed by Israel's security wall. They can't come and go without Israel's support, allowing it. And for the most part, they didn't allow it. And so, they're miserable in there. And so every now and then, Hamas lobs some Roman candle over the wall. It's not a Roman candle.
It's not every now and then, Ted. It's almost daily. So let's be clear.
Okay, but literally,
a Roman candle, it's a mortar. It blows up. It's not. You make it sound.
But if you look up the actual casualties on the Israeli side, I think more Israelis get struck by lightning. It was like 1 to 3 per year. Again, 1 to 3 per year too many, but still, that doesn't. That's kind of like a drop in the bucket compared to like traffic deaths or something. And so then it's like, so the thing is, yes, they've been doing that for years, but that's a reaction to Israel, right? Israel has created a block. This is Israel's fault.
No, let me walk that back again. Let's go back to Yasser Arafat. Remember him, kids? The PLO got 90% of what he wanted in Oslo and then walked away from it and declared an intifada. The borders were open. They really were working towards there was a de facto two-party state. The border was pretty porous because Israel used Palestinian labor to grow its economy. Sound familiar?
That border wasn't porous. I was there. I was there in 2000. In 2000, and I was there. I was literally there a week before the Intifada started. Okay, so I know, and that border was not. There's nothing porous about it.
But you could.
But you could. Very tight controls, and I've crossed some porous borders. That was not one of them.
It was still a Palestinian from Gaza into Israel could pass on a daily basis, work in Israel on a daily basis, and then the PLO and Arafat decided to start blowing up buses.
Well, because the Israelis, I think anyone who's serious, who's fair, and looks at the offer that Israel had on the table, would say that no one could take it. Israel, they insisted that a future Republic of Palestine be completely demilitarized and have no military or whatsoever. That the Israelis reserve the right to come and go into the future independent state of Palestine as they please, and they wanted to create Bantustans throughout the West Bank. No contiguous corridor to connect the two disparate, the Gaza Strip to the West Bank. This was just like, it just wasn't going to work even if you take the politics out of it. This was a state that was doomed on paper.
I disagree. Obviously, Arafat signed it. Remember? So clearly there was something there that he liked. And you start from someplace. That's how things build. Is you don't get. Some.
Well, I mean, where do you want to start this clock, though? You want to start it in 2000. You want to start it in 1948. You want to start it in 1920 with the Balfour Declaration. You want to start in 1888 when Zionists first started immigrating to Israel.
I want to go to 1020.
Or Palestine, I should say.
I want to go to 1020.
All right.
Why not? It's just what was that? The Fourth Crusade that didn't even get to Israel. They just ended up in Algeria or Albania and just started killing people there. They said, you know what?
Anyone with a funny hat was dead.
This isn't as good as anything.
Yeah, literally, they went to Istanbul and were killing a bunch of Christians, and then they were like, because they wore funny hats, they assumed they weren't Christian. Not even kidding. Idiots.
Okay, so
hayseeds.
We can take this back 5,000 years.
Right. We sure can. And by the way, sorry, I interrupted you. Please go ahead.
No, that was really pretty much going to be the end of the thought. Other than we can do that, let's talk about what's happening today. Now, where Ted and I can agree on, and this is where I don't think Ted goes there. I go there because I'm a supporter of Israel, much more vehement supporter of Israel. I don't see an end game. The Colin Powell go with an overwhelming force, have a stated goal. What does victory look like? And when you achieve it, get the hell out of there. I don't see those last two things now anymore. I simply see a gutting of a region. Now you're seeing abject famine. I think has a technical definition, which I don't think this reaches yet. I mean,
people who are more expert on this than us, like Doctors Without Borders, and
you're the only person I've ever heard use the word famine so far.
Oh no!
Yeah. Oui.
Right. Well, right. You can Google Gaza and famine right now. You will find many people.
Oh, okay, I'm not going to go
smarter than we are saying that.
Yeah, I'm not. Well, are there people smarter than us, Ted?
Maybe not at this hour because the coffee's kicking.
So those of us who support Israel, those who support the Palestinian movement, anyone who looks at this situation now has to be aghast and has to say enough is enough. What is the end game? And honest to God, Ted.
Well, before we go there,
yeah.
What do you think is? And this is seriously a question that I have not heard. This is one thing that unites us all. Nobody can figure out. Nobody except the Israelis really knows for sure what the Israelis are up to. What's their certainly we heard some bloodthirsty rhetoric after October 7th that we're going to kill them all, we're going to turn off their food, turn off their water. Now, the reason I always that's being dismissed by supporters of Israel as a intemperate language, overreacting in rage to the atrocities of October 7th, 2023. Okay, let's just say that were true, but those people never retracted those statements, and they were allowed to remain in government. Now, Scott, if I worked for President Stantis and I went off on some wild, intemperate tear and said, we're going to kill all the Canadians and we're going to turn off their food and they're not going to have medical care, you'd be like, Ted, you got to walk that back or I'm going to fire you. And if you didn't do that, it would be because you agreed with what I said. Yeah.
Yeah. You and I both know that, okay, the political background of this is also Netanyahu stays in power and vis-a-vis stays out of jail because of an alliance, and some would say an unholy alliance with the profoundly religious right-wing parties that are just batshit crazy. They're
fascist.
Yeah, I guess, okay. I would do that and say that they use intemperate language. To your point, Ted, this is where you and I will find agreement. Is some of the language used by not just those parties, but let's talk about the settlers who are, in my view,
they're crazy too.
Illegal, and they're crazy. And they
a lot of them are from right here in New York.
The dehumanization of Palestinians and the language used. I was talking to my wife this morning about this issue, and it's like never again until it does. Maybe there may be an addendum to that slogan. This is now reaching a point where it's heinous. This is now. You asked me several times, Ted, when is enough enough, and we've reached that point.
And what do you think the goal is here?
That's my point.
Here's the thing that's so there's so much about it that's honestly peculiar, right? So you and I, we've studied history. We know a lot about war. And I can't say that I've seen a lot of wars that really follow this kind of trajectory, right? So basically, it starts out, this war doesn't start out that unusual. It basically is like, okay, we don't commit a lot of ground troops. We bomb the shit out of the place by air. Okay, we've seen that before. Then we're going to send in the ground troops to try to ferret out the people who are the Hamas people who are based in the tunnels underground. Okay, I can that I understand too. That's kind of like what we saw in the Battle of Fallujah. But then that's when things start to turn hinky, because then the Israelis keep saying, okay, they issue a warning to an area. Everyone evacuate from this town. Go somewhere else. Everyone packs up and goes. Then they go in, they bomb the shit out of that town, in many cases, according to reporters, where there's no Hamas anywhere to be found. And then they send in demolition squads to demolish and detonate any building that survives and carefully, methodically level it. They bring in bulldozers to level it. Then they tell the population, okay, you can go back there, but there's nothing to go back to. Then later on, they come back and issue another evacuation order for the same place that they already leveled to the ground. But and then they bomb it again, but there's nothing to bomb. I mean, it's like, the Gaza Strip's a small place, Scott. I mean,
it's about the size of Manhattan Island, right?
Right, exactly. And it's like, let me tell you, if you're bombing every single day for a year and a half, I mean, there probably wasn't much left after 3 months. So it's like, I mean, the Israeli Air Force is very effective. It's kind of like, at this point, it's almost like they're running around in circles and playing the same game.
I don't know if it's circles, Ted, and this is where you and I will find some common ground, because we're not being told, and this is where I am, I'm passionate about transparency and about communication, especially from the powerful to those of us who are not. I want to know what the hell the end game is here, and we're not being told. And the only conclusion you can make here is that they want to obliterate any Palestinian presence in Gaza. They're moving in on the West Bank, and also on Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. And
well, that's pretty much over there.
Yeah, I mean, it's been interesting. I think the Israeli strategy has been effective, if there is to eviscerate.
No question.
But now, what happens next? And they're not answering. I'm not seeing any answer to that question now.
Well, they're pushing the entire population to the south by the border with Egypt, which they did before.
Right.
And then they let them back north. Now they're pushing them back down there. The Egyptians think that the Israelis are about to open the door and just expel the population into their territory. And they're saying, no, 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 no. Oh, no, you don't. No, no, no.
Well, they've done it before, and they've done it in Jordan. They've done it in Syria, and all three countries have at some point say, okay, these guys are radical, and we don't want them in our country.
Well, not 2 million people. They're not all radical. Starving babies are not radical.
Oh, I've been around babies.
They can be highly annoying, especially when they haven't eaten in a long time.
So I've looked at them. You look at a map and you look at the Sinai and you look at the possibilities there, and you think Egypt has done nothing with it. Is it a practical place to create? I mean, first of all, it's large, and you could have a lot of. I mean, yes, it's arid desert, but you can change that. I mean, we've proven that with Arizona. So yeah, you may be right. They may just be squeezing them out and saying, okay, they're gone, and it may really become Mara Gaza.
But that is so. I mean, all right. So
that was always. And by the way, I want to give.
I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think the Egyptians will allow it, and that's why
they may not have a choice. I mean, in all seriousness,
I don't think they have a choice to allow it. The domestic. So the domestic politics of Egypt will not, I think, permit it. Al-Sisi can't allow the Palestinians into Egypt for a bunch of reasons that, as Americans, we don't think about because it's not our country. But Egypt's a poor country. If you're an Egyptian, do you really want to be competing for jobs with a massive new population? I mean, think about the migrant influx and the political consequences we've seen here in the United States. that goes quadruple there, where people are poor and they're competing for scarcer research.
That's interesting. I had not considered that. That's fascinating.
And so the Egyptian public will not be happy about this at all. Not to mention they'll view it as a betrayal of their Muslim brothers. Listen, we once went to war with Israel to fight for the Palestinians, and now you're and we already allowed a lot of them in back then. And it's like, and now you're like gonna let the Israelis get away with it and stealing Gaza and the West Bank. The Israelis have already stolen 60% of the West Bank. You're gonna let them do more? I think they're Mubarak was overthrown by a revolution in Egypt. Al-Sisi came in as a result of that revolution to Tahrir Square. He's got to know, like, bad things could happen to me if I were to allow this. I don't think he can allow it. He's being squeezed, but he's got to be more scared of his own people than he is of the Israelis.
Well, that's interesting. You brought up a very practical, point that it's happening here in the United States. How many times on your other show, you slut, where you have your producer come on, Robbie, who lives in Montana, and talks about immigrants coming in, undercutting wages and so on. So that's something I'd not considered, and something that you're absolutely right about. Ted, and by the way, I was about to sing your praises before I was interrupted by Ted Rall.
Sorry. Not one of my better habits, as my ex-wife can tell you.
Well, you did mention that they just want to level it and annex it. That is the only conclusion we can come to now, that is the strategy, because there's proof of nothing else.
There's no evidence, right? Okay, so for me, we're trying to read the tea leaves. We're reduced to that. But I was thinking about Netanyahu's statement in responding to the French decision, and he said there's no one should recognize a Palestinian state next to Tel Aviv. I'm like, that's an interesting way to word it, right? I mean, Palestinian state's going to be next to Tel Aviv no matter what. So the question, if you were not interested in ethnic cleansing and genocide and killing or displacing the entire population of Gaza, 2 million people, then you would say something that sounded more like, this is something like, of course, Israel will look forward to working with, recognizing, and being close friends and allies with a free and democratic Republic of Palestine, not run by Hamas or terrorists, with whom we can partner and walk boldly into the future together as brothers, right? But that's not. It's like, but we can't. But France should not recognize, under the current situation, where Gaza is administered by the Hamas terrorists who murdered our people on October 7th. That's validating Hamas. But we have nothing. Our enemy is not the Palestinians. Our enemy is Hamas. But he didn't say that, right? He's like, no one should recognize a Palestinian state next to Tel Aviv. Well, Gaza's going to always be next to Tel Aviv. That's just geography. So, so that to me says the signal is we will never allow any kind of Palestinian population there anymore.
So what are next steps, and what are we, like I said earlier, you and I have discussed this numerous times, and you have asked me point blank, when is enough enough? We've reached that point. I'm now ready to say, this is enough. We need to know what you're doing, and we need you to stop it. We need you to allow Doctors Without Borders. We need you to allow other relief organizations to come into Gaza and relieve the suffering.
Doctors Without Borders is there.
They're kind of there. They're in and out because
because they're not being given any security guarantees by Israel. They're not allowed. Israel's not allowing proper supplies to come in. Even their own doctors are literally collapsing as they're trying to take care of their patients because they're not eating either.
And that's, I think any reasonable person who believes in humanity recognizes that now it's
5 miles away, Scott. People are in Israel, sipping sweet red wine and eating couscous, right? It's like there's no shortage of food. This is.
Oh no, famines are human. Are if you look at the history of famines, by the way, are almost 100% caused by human beings.
True.
It's almost never drought or other, pestilence. It's always It's always humans
And
who are
there's
hoarding off
usually
and
food. There's just not money to pay for
starving people out. And if that's part of the strategy, if that turns out to be what they are very consciously doing.
Do you think that's a legitimate strategy for Israel or any country?
No, of course not.
To be deploying in a post-medieval era?
Well, warfare in the 20th century changed dramatically from World War I to World War II. It went from battleground fighting, flags and unfurling the banners and all the bullshittery that comes with war, to the bullshittery of World War II war, which is we're going to just bomb the shit out of everything, including civilians. And part of the stratagem of World War II from the Allies and from both sides, but as we were attacking Germany, as we were attacking Japan, was to make the population suffer. And we, mission accomplished. Is that the strategy here? And if it's a strategy here, then you've accomplished it. Again, I'm to the point where tell me what you're doing. Tell me what's next. And my fear for someone who, and that is that's the right word, for someone who loves Israel the way that I have, is that the batshit crazy conservative religious parties have such sway and have dehumanized the Palestinian people to such a degree that starving them to death, wiping them off the face of the planet is the right strategy. And any person who has any shred of humanity inside them can't look at that and look away or say that that's okay. So what should I think,
Yeah, can I say, I first of all, I just want to put up this comment.
Okay.
This person, fuck Israel and fuck the both of you. So apparently I've been lumped in with you, Scott.
Okay, well, that's fair.
Fair enough, indeed. But I put it up there just to sort of show the passions that are aroused.
Yeah.
People are so angry, even though I'm a huge critic of Israel. And I've been
that's strange to me.
stridently supporting the Palestinians my entire life. Okay, fine. Fuck me too. Scott, I'm going to diagnose you with a major case of cognitive dissonance here. I mean, how can you still love a country that's doing this?
Because the core of its existence, the core of its founding, I still find more than just compelling, but important in the world. But
when a country, first of all, I don't agree with that. But let's just stipulate it for the sake of argument. But when a country devolves, which most of them do, from the high standards of from their founding to where they engage in depraved behavior, this is depraved behavior. It's as depraved as it gets. Children are literally dying for no reason whatsoever. The Israelis are just having fun and they don't care.
That's a cynical view, but okay.
They don't care. They don't care, right? I mean, we haven't heard a single statement of hearts and prayers from the Israeli government or from the prime minister. But
you are hearing it from the people of Israel.
Not much.
You're there protests, and there are
some, yeah. But I'm talking about the government. So when a country devolves like that, I mean, at a certain point, you can't just say like, "Well, you guys were awesome," it's like back in. I mean, I'm not going to say they were awesome in 1948 because they weren't. The Nakba is a real thing, but I don't want to relitigate the history of the Middle East. But like the point is, you're judged by what you're doing now and what you've been doing. I mean, this is who and what Israel is. And after World War II, there was the idea of collective judgment against Nazi Germany. It's like, and we felt that the Germans had a moral obligation to overthrow Hitler, and we punished them because they didn't. Now, as we know, it was very, very. People tried to overthrow Hitler, and it was hard, and dangerous and scary, and so you can see why people didn't. In this particular, and by the way, the idea of collective punishment has been lobbed against the Palestinians by the Israeli government. They're saying, you guys should have overthrown Hamas because you didn't do that, and we're going to bomb you until you do, right? So if fair is fair, right, what's good for the goose. So you have now the Israelis are like, well, you're being judged by what you're doing now, and we're going to hold you all accountable, or we're going to all hold you responsible, certainly. What's wrong with that? I mean, it's like, this is who they are.
Well, I'm not sure it's who they are. It's certainly a large number of them, but if you look at the elections, it's not everybody, certainly. And so can you love a country, continue to love a country? You can, because in its DNA, I still believe that it is a democracy in a sea of non-democratic states. That's
objectively untrue.
What?
It's objectively untrue.
What are you talking about?
Well, okay. Well, so there's two major components, right? There's the Israeli Arabs who live in Israel proper, and they don't have the same voting rights and the same citizen. They are second-class citizens under Israeli law to Jewish Israelis. And then also, everybody who lives in Gaza and the West Bank has no voting rights, right? But they're effectively part of Israel. They're occupied by Israel. They're owned and completely and controlled by Israel. Israel decides whether, if you live in the West Bank and you want to go to visit your relatives in New Jersey, Israel decides whether you can go or not. There is no Palestinian state, right? So, like, Israel controls roughly, all these millions of people. Over half the population that they control can't vote. How's that a democracy?
Because you can't have it both ways, Ted. You can't say that they are part of the state of Israel or they're part of the state of Palestine.
There is no state of Palestine yet.
I'm sorry?
There is no state of Palestine yet. Like like what happened with France is they are moving. The international community is moving toward recognition of a Palestinian state, but on the ground there is no Palestinian state. There's no Palestinian coins, Palestinian stamps, Palestinian soldiers. They're guarding the border. There's no Palestinian military. There's none of the trappings of a nation state. There's no Palestinian passport.
Which comes back to my point about France, which is what are you recognizing? But that's a discussion.
Well, it's an interim measure, right? It's symbolic at this point.
Yeah. Well, okay. If France can do that.
Well, symbolism does matter in these.
Yeah, it doesn't. But
the point is, like, this is a country whose national policy is we're going to lay siege to this enclave, which is 99% civilian, and we're going to starve them to death. And they are. How can you still support this country?
Because the country can revert back to what it was. Because this country has the mechanisms in place where they can have religious freedom. You can have mosques in Jerusalem. You can have churches in Jerusalem, as well as obviously temples.
Well, except you can have a church in Gaza, and it was even the Pope's favorite church. And the Israelis know very well where that church is, right? And they just blew it to bits.
Well, it's like I said, it's the new warfare. There is no sanctum. You remember there was a monastery in Italy as the troops were moving up in World War II, and Eisenhower, and it was an ancient structure, and the Germans were holed up in it, and it was a interesting debate with the Allies saying, should we bomb it, or should we protect it because it is so sacred.
Well, not to mention that was also American military policy, which is to try to protect historically notable buildings.
Well, and Eisenhower said, they're shooting down on us. They're killing American boys. Bomb it. And they did. Unforeseen circumstances. Once they bombed it, there was an even better hiding places for the Germans. My point is that the idea of and the gist of and the bones of Israeli democracy are strong, and that's what I respect. Now, if they do what, for instance, Zelensky has done, which is to have no elections, just get rid of democracy altogether and just say, listen, we're at war. We have to have, we can't.
Well, that is what they've done, Scott. They have suspended elections. It's not martial law, but
it's not martial law.
They haven't gone as far as Ukraine, but as a parliamentary matter, they've declared a war cabinet, which allows them to effectively suspend the normal schedule of.
Now, didn't the member of the Liberal Party leave the war cabinet? I'm trying to.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay, so you can do that. That's why I continue. You asked the question, I'm answering it. I cling to the idea and the ideals of Israel, not what's happening right now.
Okay, but I mean, isn't that? I mean, you could have honestly a German could have made the same argument in 1943, or a supporter of Germany could have said, "Look, on paper, this country has a democratic constitution. The Weimar Constitution was never abolished. The Reichstag on paper continued to meet. All the institutions of the German state that it pre-existed Hitler in 1933, they remained in place, right? I mean,
let's go back further and say
but it was a very different animal.
Under Caesar and then under Augustus and the following, the Senate still met. They still had it. Yeah, so you could make a point. It has to be a functioning democracy, and when it ceases to do that, then you have to change. I'd have to change my opinion.
Let's stipulate that it's a democracy. But if it's a democracy that's doing evil shit, does it deserve support? I mean, it's like, oh, well, we're all assholes, but we all voted for it.
Yeah. Well, as I mentioned at the top of the show, you asked me, how do you support? At what point is there a critical mass?
What would go to what? I mean,
I've just said they've gone to now. Now they're there. They are there.
Have they lost your support?
Not yet, but my hope is that they will do the right thing. Now it's a hope.
I mean, that's everybody's hope. But what would be? I mean, it is. What would be a bridge too far for you?
The continued process they're doing now.
So just more of the same.
Yeah. Yeah.
It drags on.
Yeah, that they are clearly causing humanitarian harm, and that as long as this continues, then you have stated no end game. Yeah, it's impossible for those of us who support Israel for the reasons we support it to continue to do so.
Would you then move to supporting do you support a Palestinian state?
I've supported a two-state solution. I think that's the most practical. It makes the most sense, and again, you can say on paper it makes the most sense, but truly in practical terms, it makes the most sense. But this fractured of Gaza and the West Bank makes no sense at all. You have to have, especially when, like you said, there's no way to get from one to the other.
Yeah, that's how it was. I mean, it's not unprecedented, right? I mean,
Pakistan and Bangladesh.
Yeah, it doesn't work out well though, as we saw in 1971, right?
Right. And in fact, the governance of Gaza and of the West Bank went, very diverged or did not diverge. They went in their separate directions, and they're very different governments. So, there's different sensibilities. I think I would negotiate, if I was President Stantis, I would be negotiating A, for secession, B, of hostilities, B, to allow humanitarian aid in with provisos. If Hamas takes the aid, if Hamas takes the money, starts lobbing missiles again, well, Israel will be forced to respond to that. But right now, you've got a humanitarian catastrophe that you have to fix and address. Would
you agree that it's Israel's responsibility in both senses of the word? In other words, it's their fault, and also they have a responsibility for the well-being of the population of the occupied territories.
Yeah, it's the Colin Powell, you broke it, you bought it policy.
Under international law, if you occupy it, you own it.
So, yes, I would. So I'm just getting back to the question. We don't know what their end game is, and they haven't told us. And if there is no end game other than what we can decide, as you rightly point out, we can only judge on things that are happening right now and what they're doing right now. And what they're doing right now is heinous. It has crossed a line. And if they continue to do that, then they lose my support. And I would imagine many people like myself who are finding it more and more difficult to support them.
If the goal was to get rid of Hamas, I bet that goal could be attained very quickly, right? I mean, I don't know. What it would look like would be an agreement to allow them, the leadership, to obviously not just grassroots members. They can be retrained into other things, but
if anyone understands terrorists,
be allowed to go into exile.
If anyone understands the construct of terrorist organizations, it's you, Ted. I mean, you've practically made a career out of it. And you recognize that they're smart enough to not have, Hamas Tower in Gaza City. They have hundreds of locations. They're fractured, which makes perfect sense under the circumstances.
Asymmetric warfare, right? I mean, they know that they're outgunned by the Israelis.
But it's one of those, do you remember the War on Terror, which sounded great, but what does it mean? What does the end of that look like? And this is sort of the same thing. Hamas is fractured. You've de facto created many new Hamas fighters, frankly, by your actions here. The children who are suffering now are not going to suffer in silence for their entire lives. Where does this go? And does Gaza get rebuilt? If I was President Stantis, I would approach the Egyptians and say, how do you feel about ceding? Israel will cede part Gaza and part of southern Israel if you cede part of the Sinai and make it the Palestinians.
Land swap.
Effectively, yeah.
But of course, but Gaza is the Palestinians' home. They've lived there for centuries.
Well, I understand. That's why that's why I included
Unlike the Israelis who are claiming, hey, we were there 2,000 years ago and we're back. These people have been there continuously.
You can make, again,
that does make a difference.
I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm interrupting now. I'm worried. As you've mentioned earlier, though, we can take the history back to 8,000 years ago.
Sure, but they live there now. It's their home, right?
And that's why, like I said, I would include that in a map. If you look at a map, you can have it along the sea, you can have Gaza, and then go into Sinai, and say, if you can have humanitarian aid, Israel will help build a Palestinian state. Obviously, the Palestinians will be there and help do the same. We can talk about desalination, about agriculture that can be effective in arid countries. I mean, there's a lot that you can do going forward and make this a viable, peaceful, prosperous country. And that would help Egypt as well. Anytime, if your neighbors are rich, that kind of helps your property values, right? And so my reaction, my hope is for a humanitarian response. We're not seeing it now. You're right. And so we're to a point where Israel has to tell us what they're doing. I know I keep coming to that, but I think it's essential if they can, because I don't know what I'm supporting now. Who knows, which makes it impossible to support. I'm not in MAGA Nation where I can just say, well, my guy's saying this, so that's Jake with me. I can't do that, and no thinking person can. Going forward, yeah. I have to, again, hand it to you that you may be right. And I don't know that I've said that on this issue, but in terms of Israel's long-term strategy for Gaza, it's looking more and more like you may be right, but they're going to level it, they're going to annex it, and there will be no longer a Gaza, as you and I have come to know it.
What do you think about, well, thank you. I appreciate that. But of course, what's more important is what's going on there now. What do you think about the debate about whether or not this officially constitutes genocide? And I'm of two minds about this. I think I read the dictionary definition, established after World War II, and I'm like, it's genocide. But like, in a way, who cares, right? Like, it's just basically like, it's like the bottom line is whether what you're doing, your evil shit is genocide evil shit or non-genocide evil shit. It's evil shit. And it's the evil shit that I'm focused on, not the G word.
I think, the genocide, using the word genocide in this context, as you know, is explosive. And right. for obvious reasons, given the history of Israel and the history of the Jewish people in the 20th century. I'm loath to use that word, and I don't know if it applies when you are responsible for creating a famine. We're not at famine yet, but we're close. I'm
surprised the famine took so long, actually, because not enough food supplies have been entering Gaza for a long time, and there's, the price of food has become absolutely insane there, where people are talking about.
Oh, I'm sure. I have no doubt.
$50 for like a can of whatever.
Yeah, you have to. I don't know enough about Palestinian diet. What is a mainstay? What is a staple of that diet? That varies from culture.
It's the same shit that the Israelis eat.
So, grain of some kind, I would assume. I mean, you have to, and you bring it in, and you give it away. You set up some kind of structures that demands civility, so you're not having riots.
Well, honestly, this was all existent until fairly recently. I mean, there's plenty of aid organizations that know how to do this. It's like it's not like it's a new thing to distribute food in crisis and in war zones. People do it all the time, and there are hundreds and hundreds of trucks full of food ready to come into the Gaza Strip, and the Israelis didn't allow it to come in, or Israeli settlers, intercepted the trucks and looted them and trashed them, and as the IDF stood by and laughed. There's been also these reports. The Israelis are kind of lying. They're saying that Hamas is stealing the food. No, but that's not true. But armed gangs are stealing the food, and they're armed gangs that the Israelis are supporting against Hamas. So it's like, it's a shit show.
America's never ever supported somebody and come back to bite them in the ass later.
No,
thank God.
Yeah, supporting random goons is always a good idea. Never happens as a result.
What can go wrong, Ted? What can go wrong?
So, even Germany, ironically, one of Israel's closest allies, very ironically. And by the way, France was a close ally of Israel until very recently.
Well, most countries were. Most Western countries were, absolutely, and they should have been.
Especially the countries like France and Germany that were very responsible for genocide during World War II, right? France, the Vichy regime deported 76,000 French Jews, to their deaths, and then that's not even counting in northern France under direct occupation. The French who turned a blind eye to the Nazi roundups of French Jews. So it's well over 100,000. And of course, the Germans themselves hardly needs, we don't need to revisit that. We know what they did. But so there's been guilt, right? Like, oh, well, we did that. So we have to be nice to Israel now. So to me, the French thing is a big deal, in part because it's France saying like, okay, this is really, really wrong.
Okay. No, I get the motivation. I get what it is. I just think it's a hollow gesture.
Oh, well, it is and it isn't. I take your point, Scott. It's like, does this change the facts on the ground? No, not at all. Does it make life different for anyone in Gaza or Israel for that matter? No, but it's just like, I think symbolic gestures matter. I think about like the struggle for Charles de Gaulle's Free French movement, which was the French government in exile during World War II. The struggle for them to get legally recognized by the United States was a huge one. And it basically, throughout World War II, the Roosevelt administration legally recognized and exchanged ambassadors with the Vichy puppet Nazi collaborationist regime,
is that right?
Rather than the Free French. And it was only in the last couple of months of the war that finally, FDR came around, because basically Eisenhower forced him to.
Ted knows why I'm laughing, because de Gaulle was so insufferable. The United States government would rather recognize
that's true. That but also in fairness to de Gaulle, whose politics were far to the right of my liking, he's trying to defend French sovereignty, and that's the only thing he cared about.
And the one thing I admire most about de Gaulle, not just his, steadfastness for the sovereignty of France, but also during Algeria. And he went to Algeria and went, okay, this is bullshit. This is a dumb fucking war. We're done.
He had supported.
Oh yeah. And he just went there and said, okay, this is how great would it have been when Johnson went to Vietnam in, what was it, 65?
Yeah.
And he came back and said, you know what, this is dumb. We're done.
Would have been amazing.
Yeah.
That wall in Washington would have been a lot smaller.
And a lot of Frenchmen were furious They were
Tried to assassinate him.
Yeah, well, they tried that a lot. He was hard to, apparently, for a big guy, he was hard to hit.
Right, that's true. Yeah, there's a museum in France that has a picture of his képi, that funny little pillbox hat.
Was that the bullet hole?
Yeah, with the bullet hole that went right through his hat while he was wearing it. It would be less impressive if it was somewhere else.
They were just getting drunk around a campfire. So
look at the hole in my hat, dude. You were 10 miles away.
Well, we're leaving on a happy note, but it's a sad situation.
You've been trying to look. I do want to hit you up for this. You've been trying to work toward this question, right? So,
Yeah.
Is there a way forward? I mean, first of all,
Yes.
I think we can the two-state solution appears to be unwanted and dead by all parties now. Israelis certainly don't seem to have any interest. The Palestinians don't have any interest. I think it's done, right? I mean, I think at this point, everyone's fighting for the whole schmear. The Israelis want the whole thing all to themselves, and at this point, the Palestinians want the whole thing to themselves.
I mean, it's a great question with the people, with the players in place right now. Well, I mean, who speaks for the Palestinians? I don't know if there is any.
No one.
I think if you establish
they don't have elected representatives.
Who?
The Palestinians.
No, that's what I'm saying. Well, even if they did, they'd be dead by now.
Right.
So what do you? I mean, unfortunately, there's always a way out. It just seems dark, and it also seems arduous, and it seems long. But there's always a way out. The Stantis proposal is a two-state solution if they can partner with Egypt, just because they need the real estate, and it doesn't need to be a lot. But if they could partner with Egypt and create, here is a honest to God lines on a map. This is Palestine.
Wouldn't that set a terrible precedent that rewards Israel for its behavior here?
Well, but you and I have talked about how long have we been talking about Ukraine and saying that the only real plausible piece there is to cede the Donbass region, Crimea, and let the borders stand where they have been established.
However, the Russians have far more of a legitimate claim to Crimea and to the Donbass than Israel has. Israel has no legitimate claim to Gaza.
Well, I guess you could say because they control the region, and then Russia is saying because we control the region. I mean, it's the same.
Well, there's that too.
Sometimes you have to say, okay, the bad guys or the bad actors, however you perceive them to be, get what they want, or at least get part of what they want. But Israel, to your point, more importantly, Ted, I don't think Israel is in any mood to cede or to talk about a two-state solution.
Yeah. No, you heard what Netanyahu had to say.
Which time?
Yeah, well, the thing about we don't want a Palestinian state next to Tel Aviv. I thought those words were very carefully chosen. Netanyahu he does not speak. He might speak intemperately, but he's always careful. No,
it's not. You're right. I think that but there is a way out. You said, is there a way out, way forward? There's a way forward. Whether or not any of the parties take advantage of it or grasp it or even start discussing it in any serious way, doesn't look that way anytime soon, I'm afraid, which is terrible. So,
last question. The international pressure will continue to build on Israel.
Yes.
At a certain point, I mean, I guess the U.S. will probably be Israel's last remaining ally. Is that going to be enough? And how long will the U.S. stand by Israel? And can Israel survive without the U.S. running interference for it at the UN Security Council with their veto, without the U.S. sending them $4 billion plus a year, without the U.S. Supplying them with intelligence cooperation with the Mossad and so on.
Arms.
Yeah.
So will international, in Israel will, if the current leadership remains in place, Israel will throw up its hands, roll its eyes and say, okay, and then make a nominal concession. And the world will go, yay, we're moving in the right direction, but that'll be it. I mean, if current leadership remains in place in Israel, then I don't see any serious movement towards what you and I are discussing in terms of a long-term peace. And that's unfortunate. It's unfortunate for Israel. It breaks my heart because it's like, dudes, you could live in a region where, you do have a peace treaty with Egypt. You have one with Jordan. There's a possibility of one with Syria.
Yep.
A few years ago, there was actually discussion of getting one with Saudi Arabia, of all places.
Right. Which now the Saudis are amenable, but again, they have a domestic political context to consider. That.
Well, now we throw in, oh, good God. Now we throw in Donald J. Trump and his negotiations and his perfect negotiations, the best deals. I think it's probably, he wants that Nobel Peace Prize so badly.
But, honestly, this kind of thing, it can't just be banged out, in like a couple of hours, right? I mean, in Doha. I mean, this would take probably years of shuttle diplomacy, back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, back
right,
and forth, but by careful, considered, smart, calm diplomats.
Yes.
None of those work for the Trump administration, right?
Well, and you would argue that Palestinian and Israeli, governments or spokespeople are not going to fit that mold at all. So, it's heartbreaking, and I mean, you can't. I think there are times during this conversation, Ted, where I seemed harsh and heartless, and I'm not. I mean, I do recognize.
No, I know you're not. I'm glad you said that because I know you really well, and you're a softie. I mean, this has got to be.
Yeah, no, you want to.
I mean, honestly, like this is not easy shit for you to see, right? I mean,
no, of course not. And it comes to the, can't we all just
do care about these kids and these people?
Because I'm supposed.
By the way, a lot of them are Christian, by the way, which we always forget.
Which is what?
There's a lot of Palestinian Christians. We always forget about.
Yes. And I'm charged to my faith and my personality tells me that we need to, getting along is far better than not. And, because I don't like you doesn't mean you don't have a right to exist.
I don't think the Israelis want Hamas to leave. I think they like it just the way because Hamas gives them the cover to do what they want.
Well, I thought the hits against Hamas may be gone. I just think, just from a practical standpoint, certainly for the time being.
They're
Hezbollah
highly degraded, right?
Hezbollah was degraded to an extent. I think Hezbollah's puppet masters in Tehran have been shockingly quieted. I thought the ease of which
the Iranians have had their nose bloodied.
I think the ease of which that happened shocked Ted and I. We talked about this on a phone call recently. And,
I didn't see that one coming at all.
I thought it could have happened. I'm not clairvoyant. I'm not saying I predicted it, but I thought, is their Republican Guard the same as Saddam's Republican Guard, where they just a 1 million man army, which is a huge number and seems daunting, but as soon as it gets hit, folds like a house of cards. It was crazy. And then Iran they didn't scramble their Air Force, and it's a sizable, up-to-date Air Force. They weren't going to put the Fokker D Wolves up there and go, clear. That's a real Air Force. And so shockingly, they didn't use that. I was stunned. And also their lack of nerve to escalate the exchange with Israel shocked me too. Their response seemed shockingly sedate compared to what, I don't know, Israel's would have been, or frankly ours, the United States would have been. But Hezbollah is still going to limp along. Hamas, I think, is significantly damaged, if not obliterated. But now you've created something else. And you and I both know the history of that region, of the Middle East, of what happens when the guys who we say, okay, let's get rid of these guys. That's rarely replaced by better guys.
Well,
almost never.
No, that's true. And you also know what happens when, a whole population is traumatized by having their relatives killed.
Yeah.
And, you're in a part of the world where revenge is part of the culture.
Well, there was, of all things, there's a Mad Men and the Roger character, was at Iwo Jima. He fought in the Pacific, and they have a meeting, and this is now, the show takes place in the early to mid 60s, this episode, and they have a meeting with, I think it's either Toyota or Honda or one of the Japanese automakers, and Roger just goes off on him. And it speaks, and the reason I'm bringing it up, Ted, is it speaks to what you're addressing, which is, how do you find forgiveness for people who shot you, who tortured your friends and family, who bombed you, who shot at you, who blew the head off your best friend who was standing next to you? That's a huge ask. And we tend to ask it a lot in this world. Mm-hmm. You and I, again, we have a lot of phone conversations we probably should record, but the South African reconciliation courts, where you just said, you know what I did was wrong. I feel remorse, and you move forward. And that's again, a huge ask, but that's going to have to happen. And again, that's demanding big personhood of people. I'm not sure that's fair to ask, but it's the only way to survive.
I can't possibly argue with you about that. All right, so Scott, you know what time it is.
Yeah, let's lay off the music on this one. This has been is a difficult topic, and we have to. By the way, as soon as we're done here, we have to go fuck ourselves. So
we have to go what?
Fuck ourselves.
Oh, right. Good point. I hope I can reach. All right, here we go.